Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another video. And today we've got the CDC ending the eviction moratorium. So the U.S. Supreme Court has ended the CDC's eviction moratorium. So why is this all news? It's news for a couple of reasons. For one, I do believe that this was unconstitutional. We will get into that because a lot of people like to throw around the term unconstitutional without actually citing the Constitution. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at the rental relief that was attempted to be provided, how much of a disaster that is. Basically, job openings. I'm going to recommend that we get a job here, and I'll tell you guys exactly why, and that's just because of the inflation numbers. We'll also get into the aid that is available and how to get access to that. But just quick preview of that. I do think that it's a disaster, so I would prefer that people go get a job because it's going to be safer for you, your family. But in the meantime, obviously, you got to do what you got to do. So let's get into the story, the meat of the video. The U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday ended the pandemic-related federal moratorium on residential evictions imposed by President Biden administration in a challenge to the policy brought by a coalition of landlords and real estate trade groups. So these landlords, these real estate trade groups, they were losing a lot of money. We'll also get into later in the video what the average landlord looks like. Okay, so people assume that landlords are this very rich, very evil class of people, but we'll go ahead and get into who those landlords actually are, right? It's people, normal people like yourself and I, right, that just make a little bit of extra money. It's not like these massive decamillionaire people that are these landlords. So basically what the Supreme Court was arguing down here, and I believe this was Judge Kavanaugh, is if a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must directly authorize it. So he basically wanted Congress to directly authorize it, not the CDC. Let's get into why it was unconstitutional. So this is the Fifth Amendment. Some of you guys might remember this, as I do, from the Chappelle Show.
I plead the Fifth. I plead the Fifth. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anything you say, 5. Go ahead, ask me a question.
Did you?
5. I have a secret document that I think you need to say.
But anyways, the landlords are essentially pleading the Fifth. So let's read into this. So no person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising on land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject to the same offense twice, so no double jeopardy, nor shall be compelled in any criminal defense to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. And this is the kicker down here. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So private property being taken for public use, that was, for example, the quartering of the British soldiers. That's what was going on in the political environment. That is essentially the spirit of the law, right? If you're going to take over private property, you have to give just compensation. So you have to essentially pay these landlords their rents, right? So let's look at the attempts to pay these landlords their rents. Fed report that 89% of rental assistance remains undistributed. Okay, so there was about 45 million, from what I can tell, 45 billion rather, that was supposed to go out to all of these landlords and to these tenants. So if you actually go in, there's essentially a relief program that you can go and sign up for as a landlord and tenant. You guys both fill it out for each other, and we'll get into that later in the video. But you basically sign up for it, and the government directly pays the landlord. Or if the tenant signs up and the landlord does not decide to sign up, the government will directly pay the tenant, obviously with the intention that that is used to pay the landlord, right, or pay for housing needs. And the idea behind all of this was to keep people off the streets so that they wouldn't end up going and spreading more COVID, right? So that was the purpose of it, so that people wouldn't end up on the streets, end up spreading COVID. But with COVID being possibly endemic at this point, most likely endemic at this point, this just doesn't seem like it's going to make a dent in the fact that COVID is going to be around to stay. So moving on into the next part of the video, we're going to move into the aid available. If you want to skip this part of the video and move on to the part about inflation and landlords, I'll put a timestamp on the screen right here, but I'm just going to show really quick what aid is available and basically how to go about getting that. So you're going to come down here to COVID-19 resources, and you'll go to, if you're a renter, you'll go to renters. Okay, so resources for renters. And I'll leave this down in the description below. So you'll go resources for renters, and then you're going to scroll down here to ERA programs, emergency rental assistance programs. Okay, so you'll click on this, the ERA programs. Okay, so find rental assistance. So you'll go over here to find programs in United States if you're in the United States, U.S. territories if you're over there. And we will just go to Alabama since it's up top here. Okay, we're going to go to ERA Alabama. Click here to access ERA Alabama. And basically, you've got your landlord application. You can start applying there, or you've got your tenant application. I'm just going to assume that we are doing the, It looks like there's just a landlord application here. So you'll go to apply and log in. What happened? All right, we'll come down here to my home state of Washington. I don't know why Alabama is not working. Let's go to Washington, and we will go to, let's try to find the application here. So as we can see here, this is kind of like notoriously difficult to navigate. So that's why a lot of this aid has not gone out. So let's go to homelessness assistance, resources, Washington 100-day housing trust fund. Program links, applying for the housing trust fund. I'm not even sure where to go. This is unscripted, but I can see why we're seeing this over here. 89% is undistributed because this is very difficult to actually find. Okay, apply for housing trust fund. Okay, so on the Washington page, I went to press the home button. I went to rent assistance. Let's go to learn more here. Rent assistance, you can contact them here. So it looks like eviction complaints, all that stuff, you can direct that towards here. So, but anyways, all that to say, you can go over here to this HUD.gov, and then you can go over to rental assistance, and you can find some help there. But the long-term solution is going to be trying to find a job. So U.S. is setting records for job openings. So in the last month of August, U.S. jobs rose from 10.1 million to 9.5 million. I understand that some of these are lower paying jobs, but what we are seeing is a trend of wages going up in a response to a lot of the very generous government benefits. So what we're seeing is rapidly rising wages, and we're starting to see inflation rear its ugly head, right? They're saying that inflation is transitory, but I don't believe that for a second, right? And we also see the largest food stamp increase in U.S. history. So it was a 25% increase in food stamps. So what does that mean? That basically translates to not necessarily a 25% increase in food prices, but it's also an injection of money into the economy, because a lot of people may not know this, or that if they didn't grow up with poor family members, but sometimes people will sell their food stamps, and essentially food stamps operate just like money does, right? You can buy food with it, but you can also sell them off at a discount to other people, and they circulate in the same way as money does, right? You have this EBT card for anybody who's worked at a grocery store or just known somebody who has food stamps. There is basically just a gift card for food. That's essentially what it is, at least in Washington state anyways. So the money supply is going up in a massive way, and that is going to lead to a lot of inflation. So you want to be on the side of controlling your income rather than having the government control your income through this, right? This is not your long-term solution, right? You want to be able to control your income and ideally have some type of income that you can scale with inflation, right? So moving on to the last thing, 21 insightful landlord statistics. So I'm only going to go through a couple of these. I'm going to cut this up. So very interesting statistics about who landlords are. Number 2, landlords have an average income of $97,000 per year, right? So $62,000 for non-landlords, $97,000 for landlords. And this is as a result of certain things like tax benefits that they get, right? I would assume that this is based on adjusted gross income. So you do get some write-offs as a landlord. So this person might be making more than that in revenue. They might be making more than that in actual rents, but as far as their actual income, it's not that much higher as much as people would expect it to be. So if somebody's not paying their rent for 2 years, it's going to hurt the landlord just as much as, that person is hurting, that average person is hurting. Number 4 down here can be a little bit misleading because you have to actually do the math on it. It says landlords have raised an average of 31% on rent since 2010. But if you actually do the math on that, that's about 3% a year, which is about in line with inflation. All right, this one was actually pretty interesting. The average landlord has 3 properties, okay? And these aren't necessarily worth that much. So 40% of landlords own 200,000 or less of property. 30% fall between 200,000 and 400,000, and 30% of landlords own 400,000 worth or more. Only 7% of landlords own $1 million worth or more. And that does not necessarily mean that it's unleveraged. They could have a mortgage on some of it, all of it. So only 7% of these people are millionaires based on their real estate, right? So they could be millionaires based on something else, but only 7% of the top landlords own $1 million or more worth of real estate. So landlords are not necessarily the richest people. And oftentimes what you see is that landlords, they're either retired and this is their retirement plan, or, sometimes they can't work at all. So they're not this, big evil class of people that has, all this money. A lot of landlords are just using this as their retirement plan. Number 17 is pretty interesting down here as well. Half of single property landlords purchased the property as a primary residence. So in other words, they just bought a house, they lived in there, they moved to another house, and then they rented out their old house, right? So that's essentially what I'm going to do within the next, 1 to 3 years. That's what my plan is to do. And 50% of them didn't initially buy it as an investment property, right? So they just transitioned their current house into a rental property. So that's basically what I'm doing, house hacking right now. Then I plan to buy another residence and rent out my current one. And this is the last one. We will end the video on this note. Evicting a tenant may cost a landlord up to $10,000. So that's legal fees, that's repairs on the property, that's all of those things, right? So anyways, hopefully this was insightful to some people out there. There is some help out there that is very hard to access, it seems. It seems like not a lot of this money is going out. The job market is booming over here. So that's definitely my recommendation, is that we, do what you have to do. In the meantime, there are rental assistance programs available that you can apply for with you and your landlord. But the job market is booming, and inflation, I think, is coming, right? We see this food stamp increase, and that's just my recommendation. I think that the U.S. Constitution says that this eviction moratorium was unconstitutional, right? The seizure of property. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, got something out of it, learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video.